This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from OpenLMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in edtech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And OpenLMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. My name's Ladek, and my guest for this episode is David T. Livingston, who is the Executive Director of Health Plan Workforce Development at Kaiser Permanente. In this automated conversation, David and I talk about why are chatbots a good tool for workforce development, especially when it comes to reinforcing learning. And then I asked David what were the 5 ways he was seeking to improve this sales performance through the use of chatbots. Next, David and I talk about why Kaiser chose the chatbot platform at all, and then how challenging the implementation was. And then we talk about why is human intervention still super important, even if you're using chatbots. We then talk about what was David's strategy to create success with the chatbot program and, the particular challenges that he faced in terms of interactions, in terms of feedback, and how they improved the process overall. I then asked David, to talk about how does he ensure that his entire day doesn't just become texting with others, because now that he's using chatbots for this workforce development. And then finally, as we always do, we asked David to talk about how the chatbot program will continue to expand or not at Kaiser in the future and what they're looking for from this platform to continue to improve their business. And remember, we record this podcast live so that we can interact with you, our listeners, in real time. If you'd like to join the fun every week on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on YouTube, just come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe. Now, I give you David. Welcome to everyone. Again, my name is Ladek. I'm with a company called OpenLMS, as you can see. And I'm very, very excited to have my guest here today, David Livingston of Kaiser Permanente. David, how are you today?
Fine, Mike. How are you?
I am wonderful. Tell us, I know that you probably don't have a grand piano in your office or living room with you. What part of the universe do you actually sit in?
I actually live in Palm Springs, California.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Right. Well, I hope that as we're talking now that the weather is good for you and not so horrid.
It's getting better. We've had a really rough winter. For us to be in the 50-degree weather for months is odd, but we're approaching 70 right now, so it's pretty good.
Fantastic. David, you are the Executive Director of Health Plan Workforce Development at Kaiser. I like to give everybody the opportunity, rather than reading a bio, to sort of tell us about yourself. Where'd you come from? What do you do right now? How would you like to position yourself?
That's great. So my background, I'm originally from the East Coast. I moved out to California about 10 years ago to join Kaiser. But my background is in marketing, sales management, and learning and development. Prior to coming to Kaiser, I had many jobs at the Xerox Corporation, and my last 10 years at Xerox was leading learning and development for sales for Xerox. And so in 2012, I graduated from Capella University with a Ph.D. in education in the specific area of training and performance improvement, and was recruited by Kaiser to come out and lead their learning and development organization for sales in California.
Okay, fantastic. Wow, this is so cool. Xerox to Kaiser. Yeah. We're here specifically today to talk about chatbots, which obviously is a little more prescient today than when you and I scheduled this conversation a little while ago, now with the advent of GPT and whatnot.
Yes.
But set the stage for us. Why were chatbots a thing that, as you took over your role there at Kaiser, that you wanted to consider, and specifically, we had talked about in workforce development. So set the stage for us.
So what we were looking at was how do we improve create a reinforcement strategy. We all know that when we're in a learning space, we're teaching we're having experiences around a topic and really trying to get people to grasp and retain critical information. And typically in this space, people have knowledge gaps, they have skill gaps, motivation gaps, environmental gaps, and communication gaps. And we were trying to figure out in all those areas, how do we actually build a strategy that's going to close those gaps? And so we were looking for a technology and a tool and a consistent methodology would help us to reduce the gaps that we identified around reinforcing knowledge, skills, and behavior.
Mm. And can you like give me I'm trying to sense the scale of the problem. Like how many people are you trying to engage with? Like, are we talking thousands, hundreds of thousands?
Sure.
Is it across all aspects of the company from pharmacies to, to doctors to whatnot, or like what's your wheelhouse?
Just a really good to narrow it down because Kaiser is over 225,000 employees. So I do not have responsibility for the 225,000.
Come on, David, you can do it. You got a PhD.
I have a smaller chunk of the population. It's about 2,000. And so I specifically target the sales and account management underwriting populations, which sell and market our services to our clients, brokers, and customers. So that population is much smaller. So what we're going to talk about today is a reinforcement strategy to support a specific program that we deploy, supporting our managers around coaching. So the overall idea was to develop a reinforcement strategy, and how to do that was to actually use a particular software and tool to help us close that gap around reinforcement. You know, and everyone on this call will know that the biggest issue we have around any knowledge acquisition is that 87%, and this is research done by the Gartner Group, 87% of what's learned, you actually lose it within the first 30 days. So you only retain 13% of what you actually learn if it's not reinforced. So that's a huge loss gap. Think about you investing in something, and after 30 days, someone only retaining 13% of it.
Believe me, I've experienced this recently myself, where I had a colleague show me a process, or here at Open LMS. I literally wrote to him the next day. I said, "Look, I am sorry, but none of that stuck. None of it at all. I'm like, please make me a Loomly so that I can, figure it out." Anyway.
Well, it's even worse when you go to a presentation. That's a whole different conversation, because we actually have done some research around retention of presentations, because as salespeople, the most important thing is for them to get their message across and so that people can take action in their presentation. The problem is typically when you give a presentation, people are not focused on what's really critical. And so when you leave that presentation, if I'm not specific on what I tell you, what I want you to remember and retain, you're going to remember random things that have nothing to do with
you're going to remember the temperature of the room, or what you had for lunch, or hey, how come Cheryl didn't show up, or that.
You might remember a picture on the screen that you saw that was really interesting, but that's not what I want you to remember.
Interesting.
I need to physically focus on the critical things and repeat them several times through that presentation. So at the end, and then I need to ask you at the end, when you ever seen at the end of a presentation, you see someone says, "Thank you." Guess what you're going to remember when you left out the presentation?
Thank you. Absolutely. 100%.
That's not the message you want to leave with. So this is all going to the point of reinforcement is critically important, and how can we do that in a way that's going to help people retain and be able to perform better on the job.
This is not my conversation. Like, this is not, you're not interviewing me, but you just struck a huge memory in me, in that when I was in fourth grade, the band teacher said, he said, "Look, there's two things that people remember at your concert. The first note and the last note. Those are the two things that they remember. Everything else in between it's beautiful, and you're but those are the two things that they remember." So there you go. Interesting.
So what your teacher, what he gave you was really, if you think about the neuroscience around it, it's really what he was ahead of his curve back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So talk to me about, reinforcing. So it sounds to me like you're trying to train your sales force about how to reinforce their message to the people they're communicating to. So it's almost like that your strategy is then something that they then need to implement as well. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. So the strategy was really around 5 areas. Number one, we wanted to be able to reinforce the content we were actually delivering to them, because reinforcing the content means they're going to have access to that information when they need it, when they're out in front of their sales audience. We also wanted to create a culture of continuous learning, so that people realize that you don't just come to an event and that's it. There's a constant cycle of learning. Then we also wanted to ensure that in our strategy, we design something that was going to be engaging and personalized. Because the more personalized something is, the more it's towards me versus general,
Right.
I'm going to have more allegiance to that. We want to also automate the process so that something we couldn't do, we're all working with less people and less resources. So we want to have something automated. And lastly, we want to be able to collect data about this process. And so when we built the strategy, that's what we were looking for. And that's what we were trying to drive towards in our process.
Hi there. I'm sorry to break into the show right now, but if you're enjoying this show, if you are challenged, if you're inspired, if you're learning something, if you think that you're going to be able to get something out of this to put into your practice, do me a quick favor. Pause right now and just hit subscribe on your podcast player right now. It doesn't matter which one, just hit subscribe, because that way it'll make sure that you never miss an episode in the future. Thanks. Now, back to the show. Once you've created the strategy, what's the next step? Like, did you immediately go out and find a tool? Was this something that you built bespoke in-house? Did you call a meeting of 1,000 sales professionals and be like, hey, guess what? Things are changing at Kaiser. Like, what did you do?
It's so funny because I attend many conferences throughout the year, and I'm always looking for how can I improve the workflow, the work process, the stickiness of whatever we do in learning. And I happened to attend a conference. My organization is a member of the International Society for Performance Improvement. They host a yearly conference, ISPI. And at this particular conference, I went through a series of workshops. And one of the workshops was on the use of chatbots in learning. And it
light bulb went off or what?
Yes, a light bulb went off. And literally at this meeting, they were talking about using chatbots as a reinforcement strategy. I'm like, problem, answer.
Now I'm going to call you out here a little bit. Like, so
yes.
You got a PhD. It's fairly not fairly recent. You've got decent amount of experience. Does the term chatbot in terms of technology and implementation, does that cause you anxiety, or you just like, look, I got a team, they can take care of this, or you're like, look, I can throw this together, no problem?
No. So the one thing that we all have experienced chatbots, and so the one thing that we all have experience with is negative reaction to chatbots, because most of us in our lives have interacted with chatbots. Oftentimes when you're a consumer and you're engaged with a company and you're online, oftentimes you're not talking to a live person, you're talking to an automated chatbot. And so that engagement for some people has been positive, for many it's been negative. So that was a concern that I had when I first heard about the technology.
Can I ask you to do a little bit of research? Maybe this is your next paper that you write in that.
Yes.
How many people experience chatbots either for the first or second time, or their experience with a company is in one of those times when they need a critical problem solved, and then that ends up becoming a super negative experience, right? Because like you go to a company to ask for help when it's like, hey, I need to change my credit card, or I got billed wrong, or something's not working, and the first thing that you run into is that.
Yes.
Oh my Lord, somebody needs to publish that paper immediately.
Yeah, and so what you just talked about was one of the things that we had to make sure of, that when people were engaged with our chatbot, they didn't have that reaction. So what that means is the company's not really maintaining and monitoring the chats that are coming back and forth. So in that situation, in our process, when someone sends, let's say you ask a question that has nothing to do with the chat conversation, we flag it. It gets sent to us automatically, and we know, and we can respond back to that individual. It might not be as quickly as we'd like to, but we will respond back. So the person's question or inquiry doesn't get lost in the process. But most of the time, if you think about, if you've engaged with an online chatbot, when you ask that random off-kill question, the system doesn't know how to react, and it will start giving you miscellaneous information that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. And then that's what frustrates you as a user. So the process we have will enable that person to still send that question through. They will still assume. In fact, when I tell you about how people interact with our chatbots, they often think it's me, because I'm actually the voice of the chatbot.
Oh,
and so you'll see as I talk further, we'll talk about how people respond to the chatbots.
So just to make sure that we're all on the same page going forward here, who are the people who are interacting? Is this an internal system? So your sales team that you're working with, this is an internal system that they're chatting with, yeah?
Yes, so it's all internal to our employees at Kaiser. And so the example I'm going to share with you today is really specifically around managers who are involved in a specific program that we deliver. But I also use these chatbots, and I'll just give you a little bit of a preview. We also use it as a communication tool in my department, and so I'll
Okay.
talk about that as well.
Okay. So take us there. So like what's it look like? What's the technology? I mean, if you can reveal that, if
Sure,
it's
sure.
bespoke or if it's an actual tool. And
Yeah, so it is a tool, and I don't want to reinforce that particular company. There are many
sure,
chatbots that are available
100%.
to everyone out there, but we use one that is fairly simple to use, fairly simple as a user, as well as us programming. My staff went to a day class online with the vendor to come up to speed, and we've had very little intervention from the vendor since that on start of this process. So it's fairly simple to program. The key that we found in the process is the logical conversation around when it's almost like a learning tree. So when you send out a chatbot, you have to think through logically what potential responses would there be based on the question you're asking. So that's the most intricacy of that process is to think through the logics behind the questions you ask. Once you get that down, it's fairly simple. If I ask you that today, what color is the sky, and most likely the response would be blue, but it could be cloudy, it could be sunny, right? So you just have to think through that process. But we have gotten down to a science of how to do that when we prompt questions, and normally they're around a specific topic, and so they're not yes or no, but very seldom do we leave open-ended. We sometimes do open-ended questions, but typically they're focused on a specific topic we're trying to gather or trying to reinforce something in something they've learned. So it's a little bit more specific.
So when you started with this tool, uh, did you say, okay, look, here's one outcome that we want to achieve with our
Yes,
sales force, and
yes.
then let's build out the branch and build out those scenarios and whatnot, and then you moved on, or was it more of a strategy like here's 5 outcomes and you did it all at once, or like what was your method of madness to create some success there?
So the method of madness was I mentioned the strategy had those 5 elements, which were very
Mm-hmm.
important. So the tool itself was, well, first off, we wanted to test it. We wanted to see what kind of engagement. So we did a pilot with a small group of individuals in this particular program. So the program we selected is our coaching program. We use the GROW model.
Okay.
And the GROW model is allows us to teach a process to our leaders around how to conduct a coaching session, right? It's goals, reality, options, what's next. So they
Okay.
use that process to get through but in teaching them coaching skills and in coaching methodology, we wanted to reinforce once they leave the program. Remember I talked earlier about that 87%
Oh
loss?
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We wanted to reinforce. So the chatbot would allow us to send out reinforcement tips, videos, PowerPoint slides, anything we thought that could trigger them in response to reinforce some of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that we taught in the program. So that was the reason why the chatbots were there to help follow up with additional reinforcement resources and prompt them for knowledge checks post the learning intervention.
And so it's interesting because most people think chatbot, hey, I have an issue.
Yes.
I'm going to go to the wherever that chatbot lives and I'll start to, I will investigate and then hopefully arrive at the outcome of solving my issue or getting the knowledge I need. But it
Yes.
sounds to me like you have a two-way street where people can do that, but then also you're doing the, retrieval practice and whatnot that you're prompting people as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So the chatbot, as you think about it, when we talk about it in the consumer realm, it's kind of like you're inquiring a question and you're getting an answer. In this particular situation, we're actually pushing information out as a resource and then oftentimes prompting them with a question around that topic or area of interest so that we can get a response from them. So it's a good way because number one, it's a soft way to introduce a question to someone. Everyone has the population we're working with all have Apple devices, all Apple
Okay.
phones.
Mm-hmm.
So iPhones, so they all have access to using that network. And so it's easy. We all have the ability to chat. We all chat at work through various means. So it's not a foreign process.
Right.
So to receive a chat from the learning and development group, and what we did to make the chat bot more personal, because remember I talked about personalization, we created an avatar. So the chatbot, so we talked about the program is called Grow
Mm-hmm.
Coaching.
Mm-hmm.
We created an avatar called Coach Grover. So it's
Please
an
tell me he's blue. Please tell me he's blue.
he's not blue. He's a bit emoji
Okay.
that is attached to every chatbot we send out around this program. And so when you think about the program, you think about Coach Grover. He shows up as this person, as this avatar, and people can relate to the avatar. If I sent you a blank text, could I still get across the message? But it wouldn't feel personalized. So the Coach Grover emoji changes. Every time he's being delivered out to you, he's in a different, physical shape, color, right, emotion, and so that personalizes the message. Not only the static message I'm sending, but also the emoji makes a difference.
100%. So just to get a little more clarity on
Yes.
the reception of messages is, again, we don't have to name, label or anything like that, but
Yes.
is this being delivered on mobile devices? Is this only like when I'm sitting at my desk, in front of my laptop? Like, I can get a text anytime. And whatever your corporate chat system is, like it
Yes.
could show up there.
Yes. So the beauty of the program is that it works, and I can't articulate all the different avenues. We at Kaiser use Teams.
Mm-hmm.
So we can communicate via Team, we can communicate via Slack, Yammer. We can also communicate via our Apple phones through text messaging. So
Right.
Those are the vehicles that we use at Kaiser.
So you have this, light bulb moment at a conference. You come back, you engage a company, you get a test case up and running.
Yes.
What were the hiccups? What were the challenges? What were the things, how did you fall on your face to kind of need to, reiterate or retool or figure out?
Yeah. So the most important thing was the amount of messaging being sent out. So we initially started with it was a 4-week test. And so we went with approximately in that 5-day work week, we would send out maybe 5 to 7 text messages a week.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what we found? It was a little too much.
People didn't respond. People were like, Grover, get out of here.
Yeah, get out of here. So we actually took that from 5 to 7 down to 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
3 was sufficient enough to engage with people over the course of that 4 weeks and to remind them and to give them resources. So that was one of the things we did find out right away. We actually followed up with the test audience to understand, what did you like? What did you like about the content? What did you like about the number of times we delivered the content to you? And so they were able to give us feedback about that. And so that's where we landed. They loved the use of the tool. They loved the use of the chat. They loved Coach Grover. They were engaging with Coach Grover. What they didn't like was the number of times we were sending out the chat messages. Sure.
Is there any way that you are able to did you ever get that comment where it's like, wow, Grover showed up, right before I had a one-on-one and, I had this coaching moment, so I knew what to do. Like, is there a way that you could be predictive about that or know when these types of when coaching moments are about to happen in this particular scenario? Or
no, there's no way for us to predict that situation. What we try to do is provide them with access to resources. So if they're getting in a coaching situation and they need to gain either access to a video of just remembering the particular, how did they use the grow process, they can have access to that. So we do provide through the Coach Grover, the chatbot, access to those resources, but I couldn't be in the moment because I would know how to respond to them unless, I guess we could set it up if they wanted to send a note to Coach Grover in the moment, but that would take a lot of planning.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yes.
Well, or I'm just, of course, I'm just thinking out loud where they prompt you or saying, hey, look, I'm about to I'm about to have one of these moments. Can you give me bullet point ABC or something like that? I don't know.
So we talked earlier about the automation of this process. So what we do in essence is we set these up well in advance, and then they're sent out. They're generated automatically. So there's not a person that's involved. Once we set it up, it's all done right through automation. So what you're asking for is human intervention, and that would take resources, and sometimes we don't have the resources to do that. So if we had resources that could actually man that could be possible.
Interesting. I believe those resources are called ChatGPT, just so you know. Anyway, but it's coming for you.
Yes.
So as as you went through your 4-week test, and
Yes.
then you got back some feedback, and it
Yes.
seemed like you got a kind of a green light. How do you scale this? Is this just like, wow, okay, a few tweaks, fewer messages, and then boom, it's, rather than
So
5 managers, you're going to 100 managers? What's
really
that
nice
look like?
question. And yeah, so really nice question. So what we did is actually we've scaled Coach Grover. So now there are programs that have a similar reinforcement strategy with different avatars associated with those programs. But we've been able to use our foundational knowledge from the Coach Grover chatbot to expand it to other areas. And in fact, one of the areas we expanded during COVID, it was really important for me to drive better collaboration among my staff. And because we used to be in a building working together, now we're all virtual. We had to figure out, well, how do we connect in a better way? So how do we make sure that people are getting the right resources around self-care? So I created a David Livingston chatbot that is a weekly chatbot out to my staff. We did it weekly throughout COVID. We're now only twice a month. But what it was a way for me to connect with my staff in a meaningful way, to check in on them, to make sure they had access to the right resources around self-care and motivation and all the things we need over the last 2 years. And that chatbot is still being used today because I still need to communicate and check in. We just sent one out the other day. It had to do with the fact that we're almost to spring break and people are going to start taking vacation. I'm trying to prompt people to take time off, to spend time with their family and friends, to take a break, because the first 3 months of the year are normally very chaotic and hectic.
So you said a word in there. So you created this chatbot so that you can be more present, right? That basically you're scaling yourself.
Yes.
Can you be a little more specific? So you're prompting them either to do something, or are you actually getting these responses and then,
I am. So like, for instance, a couple weeks ago, we wanted to know what people were doing for self-care. What was their number one self-care process? What were they doing? What did they read? Did they take walks? Because we were just trying to assess the organization. So believe it or not, which is just hard to believe, we've been doing this for almost 3 years. People, when that chatbot comes out from me, they think it's actually me, and they respond to me as though they're speaking to me, David Livingston. I'm speaking to a tool. I'm not the tool. Now, I do see the output of the tool, but people respond to me. And sometimes I personalize. I'll send them a picture of what I did over the weekend, and they'll respond back, here's David, here's what I did over the weekend. But again, it's not me personally. It's an automated tool that's responding to them in a fashion. But it does create collaboration and connection.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So as someone who may be in a similar position as you, or who's thinking about using a tool like this, I could see in the back of their mind, they're like, wow, this could get kind of overwhelming, especially as, you're talking about 1,000 staff, people maybe have more.
Yes.
How do you manage this process so that it doesn't, eat up your entire day every day, and you're not just sort of caught in chat rooms and those kinds of things?
Yeah. So depending on the program, there's a team of folks within my department who actually manage those programs and their chatbots. And remember, they are planned well in advance. We know when the class is starting. We know when it ends. So that's a little bit easier to do. The ones that I actually deploy, we meet on like every couple weeks to kind of plan out, because these have to be timely. You can't do them like the class. We can actually set them up well in advance, months in advance, because it's the same class, the same material. But with my topics, it's got to be relevant, because can you imagine getting some message from me that has nothing to do with this month?
Sure.
You would be like, I'm going to delete that chat, right? I'm not going to engage with it. So mine have to be much more timely. So there is a little bit of planning and execution that goes on with my staff as we work on this, but it's maybe we might spend 30 or 40 minutes twice a month. So it's not a huge investment. Now my staff has to go out and do some research around the topic area, pulling those things together. But for me personally, it's maybe an hour a month.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
So as you have, we've realized success around this, it sounds like that you're getting good feedback and also achieving the outcomes you want to achieve. What's the future hold? What's the 6 to 12 months? Is there more chatbots coming, or are you doubling down on this, or what?
Well, the thing that you mentioned earlier, and I didn't share with you the results. We talked a little bit about how the pilot felt about the program, but we also do something we use a net promoter. And so net promoter actually speaks to, would someone refer this tool to someone else? And so anything over 50% is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So for Coach Grover, the numbers were 70%. So outstanding. It means that people felt it was a really good use of their time and engagement. It also received a 4.9 out of 5 in terms of star rating. So really good response from the population engaged about it. So what that prompted us to do is, number one, we're continuing looking for avenues to reinforce. So we have many tools we use for reinforcement. Chatbots are one of them. So as I mentioned earlier, we started with the one for Coach Grover, but now there are 5 additional. So we're always seeking for opportunities to expand the use of the chatbots within the learning space.
Fantastic. David Livingston, you are, oh boy, I almost completely screwed up your title there. You're the Executive Director of Health Plan Workforce Development at the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, which is Kaiser Permanente to most people.
Yes.
I can't thank you enough for taking time out of what I'm sure is an incredibly busy day to speak with me today about chatbots and how you've done it. Is there, if somebody wanted to reach out, ask you a question, or pick your brain about how you did this and how they could do it, how should they reach out to you?
So they can email me. My email is david.t.livingston@kaiserpermanente.org.
Fantastic. Thank you again, David. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks again.
Thank you again for listening to the eLearn podcast here from OpenLMS. I just wanted to ask one more time, if you enjoyed this show, if you learned something, if you were inspired, if you were challenged, if you feel like, this is something you can take into your practice, please do me a favor. And right now on your podcast player, hit subscribe. That way you're never going to miss a future episode. Also, come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe there as well, because we have tons of great information about how to create killer online learning outcomes. Thanks.